If you're like me and still wondering what you want to be when you grow up, you're going to appreciate meeting today's guest, Shannon Russell. She's a career transition / business coach who specializes in helping women successfully exit their unfulfilling 9-to-5 and launch a business that not only makes them happy, but is also a reliable stream of income. On top of that, Shannon is the host of the Second Act Success podcast, which is nearing 200 episodes at the time of this recording. And her book is about to come out. So she's here because she's doing the things that many of you have expressed you want to do. And of course, it's helpful to find, follow, and get advice from people who are just a couple of steps ahead of you and willing to share about the process. Shannon, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Oh, Virginia, thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
Absolutely. Me too. I think that you are going to have so much good advice for financial professionals listening today, considering you almost have 200 episodes in on your own podcast.
It's gone by fast.
Absolutely. So give us just the high level of your journey as an entrepreneur. I know that now you're focusing on career transitions for women. And I think that's a really valuable space. I think we've all been through a career transition at least. So tell us how you help and the benefits of working with you.
I am a product of a career transition myself. I started my career in television, working as a producer for 16 years. And then I made a second act transition and opened my first business, which was a franchise, and really learned how to transfer my skills and started seeing people ask me, well, how did you do that? Can you help me figure out how to take my skills and my experience and build a business? And so, yeah, I've been coaching now for a little over 3 years and really focusing in on helping women leave that corporate space and build something of their own that really brings them joy and really plays upon their skills and experience from their first act.
Well, and even if someone listening is like a financial advisor or a money coach or whatever, a lot of clients come to them because they're facing some type of big transition or what feels like a big financial decision in leaving a career. So this could be like a perfect partnership where the financial advisor is potentially referring people to you. That's why I thought this would be perfect. So could you share a little bit, like how deep are you diving with these clients as they're working through this potential transition? I'm assuming they come to you probably already a little frustrated and knowing that they need to leave, knowing they need a change, but then they're thinking like, my salary, my benefits. I mean, how deep in the weeds do you get with people?
We go pretty deep because a lot of times I'll have people come and they know that they feel stuck, they feel unhappy, but it's just so much fear and uncertainty and giving up that stability and that security of a job to venture into something unknown is really hard. And I really want to make sure that people are learning before they leap so that they're really doing the research because I don't want you to just put that date on the calendar, say I quit and figure it out. I know how important being financially secure is and making sure that you're 100% confident in what you're choosing. So I want to make sure that we're very methodical and we make that roadmap to make sure that you do feel secure in all of those steps. So we really dive into the ideas that they might have and we flesh them out and make sure that yes, that is exactly what you want to do because you don't want to leave where you are, try something else and be just as unhappy. And so we do look at the finances first and foremost to make sure that you can plan that timeline of when you're going to pivot. Because if you do need to work for another year or so to save, we want to know that up front because that affects the timeline and how we make that transition successful.
Would you be willing to share a piece of your coaching that is directly from your own experience through the transitions that you've made? Like maybe there was a glaring mistake that you made during a step, right? And then you're like, hey, let's make sure you don't do that.
Oh my gosh, there were so many. I always say that I made missteps because I made the decision to leave TV, and I had a 3-year-old and a newborn, and I just knew I couldn't go back to missing the first birthdays and not being there for bedtime, and I just wanted to be more present. So I jumped at a 9 to 5 job that I thought was very responsible of me to do, and it was toxic and miserable. And I went for my master's in education because I thought that being a teacher was very stable. And I was grasping at straws and not taking that moment to stop and ask myself what I wanted and really check in with myself. And so that's the number one thing I say is to stop and ask yourself, why am I unhappy and what would make me happy, and really go through your skills and not only what are you good at, but what do you want to continue doing. And I think so often we're so busy and we just go through the motions that we don't take that self check-in time to really examine. And when we do that, you can have that mindset shift of, okay, I am more than my career title. And you know that you're taking a leap or taking this chance, but you're taking that experience with you and you can always go back. You're still that same person. And I think once you start shifting that mindset and you start asking yourself, what will make you happy in this one life that we have? That's when you start to feel more confident and then you want to take those next steps. And I think for me, I definitely learned that the hard way by wasting some time and money trying these things that I thought I should be doing. And now I just try to save my clients that time of like, let's just get into the weeds, like you said, and really dive in and be sure of what we want before we make some moves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think I saw you have a Your Map assessment. Does that help with that?
UMAP is exactly for that. Yep. I got certified a couple years ago, and it's the only career assessment that really draws into your strengths, your personality, your skills, and your values. And so I do that with all of my clients because once you have that, it steers you on that path that when you see this opportunity, instead of just jumping at it, you can look back at your map and say, you know what, I'm really good at being a leader, but I don't want to be a leader anymore. So I'm going to avoid that position and look for something else. Or, maybe I'm really good at numbers, but I just don't want to do those anymore. Or I want to do them in a different capacity. And the UMAP really just brings all of your strengths together so that you can make a really informed decision. So, yeah, it's a great tool.
So let me ask you, do you ever work with entrepreneurs who have already made the leap, but maybe there's something like within the business that they're pivoting like within their niche or services or anything like that. Does that ever come across your plate? That's still a really big transition and a scary space, and people need help with that too.
Yeah, I've had clients who have had like an online service based business that they've wanted to make into a brick and mortar. I actually have a client who I was so excited for who opened her brick and mortar last fall. And it was just an add on to her existing business, but it was what she had always worked towards. And I've owned a brick and mortar in the past. So we were really able to kind of go over the pros and cons and make sure she was 1,000% set on it. And then there's other people who have started businesses and kind of put everything out there, but didn't really see it scaling like they thought. So then we try to figure out different ways to bring in different revenue streams and kind of see what they want, because sometimes an entrepreneur just wants to focus on the revenue, and other times it can be, I want to focus on just serving this group of people. And so we really figure out, who do you want to serve, what's your priority, and then you can add in the podcast or the book or the speaking engagements or whatever those other little levels of revenue can be, and you can add those on top. But it's nice to kind of look and see, and then we could figure out how to scale from there.
Yeah, because I think even in the financial space, like let's say you dove into accounting because you're like, I would be working with money and I would know tax laws, and like this would solve a problem that my parents faced or whatever. We all have our stories around that type of stuff. And so you could dive into something because you are solving a problem and you do kind of enjoy, you're interested. But within that, you might find, oh, well, I'm not great at marketing, or I'm not great at this online acquisition process, or whatever the thing is. So there are so many nuances to entrepreneurship. Could you share with us just something that maybe comes to mind that you've worked with someone recently on in that space?
Yeah, you just brought up the fact that there's this woman I worked with who was an accountant and she was doing taxes for a long time for a larger company. And then she had children, went out on her own, and she decided to niche down and specifically work with women entrepreneurs who were small base businesses. So the women who are working from home and, creating, whether it's daycares out of their home or doing, nails or just smaller businesses. She was very niche down, very specific on who she wanted to serve, and she did that. We really narrowed down her message, and now she can say no to people that just don't fit that, but she feels like she can relate to these other women because she's been there, and she can use her services to help them grow their businesses. So it's kind of a win-win for her, and I like the idea of people really knowing what they're good at and niching down and building a business around that.
And I am always cheering for more people that will help entrepreneurs do that, because
Mhm.
no matter what, it does seem that even if you're trying to start out niched to a point, you're not niched enough, like ever.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like it just seems like that is an ongoing journey of whether it be narrowing services or narrowing the group of people or the way that you serve them or whatever it is. It seems like there's always work to be done in
Mhm.
that area. So, a minute ago, you mentioned writing a book, launching a podcast. You're doing all these things. Well, you have done the podcast, but you are also in the middle of writing a book, or it's
Yeah.
almost here, right? So,
Yes.
could you share a little bit about that process?
That has been more of like a childhood dream kind of goal. And I set out to write a little over a year ago and I wanted to write fiction. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to write more based on my business and what I teach so that I can reach more people. And so it's been about a year or so, and the book comes out on May 7th. I'm so excited. It's called Start Your Second Act. And it really is it's my journey a little bit into transitioning careers and then everything I teach. So I feel like it's a way for people to learn what I teach and what I work with clients doing every day, but in book form that they can take with them. And yeah, I'm just really excited for it.
I'm so curious if you'll take us behind the scenes a little bit, just trying to see this through your lens. You're running your own business, you are a mom, you've got your podcast, and then you're going to write a book. Like, how have you decided to budget your time and stack all these things? Like, how are you getting all this done?
It's hard. I actually had another business, my franchise business, the first one I started, I sold last year. So I sold that last end of summer, early fall. And so that was one less thing on my plate to focus on. But really, I just prioritized time. I joined a program that was like a 12-week intensive to help you write your first draft of your book. It was through a company called Book Launchers. It was phenomenal. And it was 90 minutes once a week. And then there was like 1 hour or two session once a month on a weekend. And my kids knew I was writing the book. And so I said, okay, from like 8 to 9:30 on Mondays, I'm going in my office. And it was just that time I dedicated to myself to do it. And it was more of a challenge to see if I actually could do it because I knew that I had things to say and ways to help people. And I know what I teach in my coaching, but how do I put that into book form? And I've written for television and I've written obviously for like marketing my businesses and blogs and things, but never a book. So it was just a big challenge. And then as I got further, I just wanted to keep going. And it was just finding those little pockets of time. And I think sharing with your family what an important project it is for you to work on makes them excited and sees that you can do more as a parent as well. And I feel like I was teaching my kids that even at my age, you can have these dreams and keep going for different goals. So it's
Yeah.
kind of been like a family project in a sense because they're so supportive of me and can't wait to read it. I haven't let them read it yet. They're going to read it when it's in our hands. But yeah, so it's been tricky, but it's just been like this is me time to do it. So
Yeah. That's
somehow it's
awesome.
yeah.
Really good advice for any what we feel is like an important endeavor. Like, okay, you're going to redo your website, or you're going to write a book, or you're going to launch the podcast, like whatever the thing is that's burning right now that you really want to do. I think that kind of like batch style production where you just kind of lock yourself away from everybody and potentially leave your phone in the other room or whatever you got to do. I think that's super, super important. So, if you don't mind, let's dive into your podcast a little bit. Walk us through. You had transitioned out of the TV career, which is super cool, by the way. We'll talk about that too. And you'd been coaching women for a little while, but you still had this other education business. So you're running that, you're coaching women on a transition out of their career, and you launched the podcast. Can you walk us through like what that period of life had in store for you?
Yeah, I had my franchise business, the STEM education business, for about 5 years. So it was running on its own. I had a big team, so it was in a good place. And I kept getting customers of mine ask me, "Oh, you're such a great teacher running this business. What grade did you teach?" And it would spark that conversation of, well, actually, I was a television producer. And then it started, well, can you help me? I kept having people ask me, well, how did you go from that to this? It's such a drastic change. And I'm interested, but I could never do what you do. And so I started realizing, especially for women, that they just instantly like poo-pooed the idea and said, oh, I could never do it. You're an enigma. I don't know how you did it. And I was like, I'm not though. I just knew there was something else and I wanted to try. It was like a challenge. And so I wanted to inspire other women to hear stories. And that's where the podcast came from. And I kind of did a little play on the entertainment industry with second act success. But I wanted to share stories so that people could listen and say, well, if she could do it, I can do it. And that's exactly what I did. I just started looking in my own world from TV, from college, from, being a mom, just people I knew. And then it just started snowballing from there of women who said, well, I changed careers and started a business. Let me introduce you to this person. And it just started snowballing. And I've had such amazing conversations because everyone has a story. When you really dig down, there's so many people who have made this transition and crazy transitions too. There's some really interesting stories. And so, yeah, that's really where the podcast started. And I continue to do those conversations 185 episodes later. And I just pepper in a couple of solo ones here and there to give advice on starting businesses and making the transition. But at the heart of it, it's just wanting to share those stories that are inspirational.
Absolutely. Well, and I definitely see the parallels of how your podcast supports your business. Like the name is the same. Like it makes so much sense. I find so often that someone has created a business name that needs development, let's say, but it's, they got their LLC, they're not going to change it. It doesn't make sense to create a podcast in that same name because you need to be more clear about who you're serving and who it's for. How did you nail your branding so well, I guess is my question.
Well, I actually worked with a branding company. I worked
Awesome.
with Brand Face, and they really helped me to nail it down. I had the idea, and they were able to help me kind of get it all together. And with the podcast, it was Second Act Success Podcast. And then I later I kind of added career in there just as a keyword. So it's Second Act Success Career Podcast. And then I added on like the subtitle to have more keywords. And so I learned that through Adam Shibley of Podcasting Business School. I worked with him for a little while. And just listening to other podcasters like yourself, you just gather so much great information on how to really get the podcast out there. But the name I just kept because it was so incorporated into the business. And I really wanted to get that idea of a second act out there and have people say, well, yeah, I can start a second act too. So it kind of came together pretty organically, but it stuck.
Yeah, it's perfect. So take us behind the scenes when you were launching. Was it this like down and dirty. I did it myself. I don't know what I was doing. I navigated, yay, I made it type of thing? Or did you have someone launch your show? What was that whole process like for you?
I'm a one-woman show. I've done it all myself, but I did take a course. I'm very pro educating. So I took a course on how to launch a podcast, which was so detailed and amazing. And that really helped me. I'm a very type A person. So I wanted to be able to walk through the steps and check them off. And so that helped me feel a little confident, but I made, the podcast art myself. I just kind of followed the outline that I was given, and I edit my own podcasts and do it all because I like to learn about it too. So I think it's really fun to teach yourself and learn along the way. But then there's been so many iterations, and I think the producer in me loves the editing aspect, and I can go in and fix it, and I can, make it as pretty as possible. But it's an experience to learn how to do it.
It really is. It really is. Well, and that dovetails so nicely because I was going to ask you, how do you think your TV producer career actually has led you here and like fed into this whole podcast production piece? Maybe helped you be successful up into 200 episodes? Because as you know, so many people drop it like within 10 episodes. So, yeah, what have you taken from your TV production career and fed into the podcast?
That is my favorite question because I think if we all kind of look at our career trajectory, we can see that thread that goes through. And for me, I always say TV was my dream since I was about 5 years old. I wanted to work in the industry. I never wanted to leave. It was just the fact that I wanted to be a more present mom that made me leave. So it wasn't anything bad. I loved it. So I feel like I checked the box on it. I made my transition to being an entrepreneur, and that this allowed me to get back into it because I get to produce my life, my business, and my podcast. And I get to write the scripts, and I get to edit, and I get to figure out the social media and decide who is going to make a great story and bring them on. And so yeah, it's bringing back that creative piece that I loved, and being in charge of really creating something again. So it's nice to put my producer hat back on.
Yeah. Well, and tell me what has changed over the past few years on the show? I'm positive that you've grown and elevated your message over time. I mean, did you start out with a really expensive microphone? Have you graduated to that? Have you changed programs? Like, what has changed along the way?
Yeah, I definitely upgraded my microphone after a while for sure. I've used a script the whole time. It's my favorite to edit. I really love just having it all laid out as like a Word document for me to edit. I tried to have a VA edit a little bit here and there, and she was wonderful, but I needed that control to really do it. So brought it back in-house to me after a short time. And I've really made sure that it's mainly women that I speak to. In the beginning, I was talking with some men, but it's women who listen. So I really kind of narrowed it down to women who are the inspiring voices. And then I've added, more solo episodes. I've tried to make them shorter because I know for me, I cap out at about 15, 20 minutes on my drives to and from school. And that's when I can listen to my podcast that I love to listen to. So I tried to make I think in the beginning I was having like hour-long episodes because I'm such a talker and I love it. Now I try to make it a lot shorter to make people be able to listen to the whole thing in, 15, 20, 30 minutes. So those are some of the changes. Otherwise, like the whole messaging is pretty much the same.
Do you remember what episode number you were on when you first received a message saying, "Hey, I heard your podcast. I want to work with you"?
Virginia, it was so early on, and it was the weirdest thing. We still don't know how it happened, but this woman has become one of my closest friends. And
That's awesome.
yeah, and she reached out to me. She actually lives in England. She lives in Jersey, which is like an island over in England. I live in New Jersey. We have so many similarities. But yeah, she messaged me, and we talk about it now because we don't even know how she first heard about me. But she messaged me wanted to come on the show. I was on her show. And we've just had this like partnership. She started her podcast around the same time I did. And so we've just had this huge friendship for years. She came to New York City, her first time to the States, and we hung out. And yeah, just amazing the friendships and people you can meet. But that was very cool. It was probably a month or so, maybe 2 into the podcast. And I was like, wow, it was very serendipitous.
Absolutely. Many people wanting to start a podcast to support their business, of course, are looking at budgeting their time, budgeting their money, the ROI that they're going to receive from producing the podcast, looking at it through this really like marketing lens. Would you be able to share some other types of ROI that you've found? Not just direct client acquisition. I'm sure that's happening, but there's lots of different ways that you're receiving benefits from speaking on your podcast. So would you be willing to dive into that a little?
Yeah, I think it's the connections, just the networking of people saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to introduce you to this person and you should come speak with me at this panel," or getting asked to speak on stages. That's been a big one, especially with the book in the works. I wanted to make sure that I was speaking out at events more. And then it's nice for people who are booking you for events, see that you have a podcast and that you can speak and that you've been invited on other podcasts. And then it's like just the social proof to say, oh, she can speak on all of these different topics. So I think it's that thought leadership that drives it back to your business. And I think that's the most important thing. And especially if you can find a way to not spend all the money on the podcast. If you can do it in a more budget friendly way to start, that's a great way to get out there, see what the reception is, and then figure out how you want to really show up in the world and have this impact your business in the long run. But start it off not spending so much money on it because it can be a very inexpensive venture if you do it the right way.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you have the capacity, right, to experiment with Descript. That is the DIY program that I recommend. It's great. And I think there's a lot of really cool, like automatic helpful things that are in there that you don't have to have like some kind of audio engineering degree to be able to function. And there was a recent advice, even on this show, that was like, hey, to start out, edit your own like first 10 episodes so that you just get to know the process. You understand how many moving parts there are. That way, when you do hire someone, you actually know what you're paying for and you already have the ear of, oh, this person made me sound great, or, that sounds just the same way I would have edited it. There's different ways to look at that too. Even if you sound the same, they've cleaned it up a little bit. They probably saved you time. So how can you use that time to get more business, to work with more clients, to do other marketing, to market the podcast? Because that's a whole nother thing. So take us there. How are you marketing the podcast specifically? And what are you finding is working for you right now?
I do the normal social media post throughout the week. I try to post a lot in the first about 72 hours of the podcast being out. It goes in my email newsletter blast. It goes as a blog up on my website. So all really easy things that I can do. And I do ads every once in a while on Overcast. I find that those bring some new listeners in. And then, of course, like guesting on other podcasts, like being here with you is just nice to have someone else say, oh, go check out that podcast. I've listened to it as well. And then you get more listeners that way. So, yeah, I feel like guesting it takes time to guest as well, as but it's a great way to not only meet other people, but get your name and your podcast out there. And then I use Buzzsprout, and I love that you can add those little mid-roll ads or pre-ads or post-ads. And I just record my little ads for whatever I'm promoting at the time. So soon I'm going to be making one for my book. And now I think it's for a freebie I have. So you can do little things like that are promoting you through the podcast as well, that are all very organic in the same kind of vein.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that is something that I've been encouraging clients to do for years, is to literally have an ad by you for your own services on your show. like like literally this show is created to attract clients to your business. So create an ad that's very specific to a freebie, a program, a course, an event that you're speaking at, like whatever is going on at that time. And Buzzsprout and several other programs have what we call dynamic ads, meaning when you create a new ad next week for a future thing that you're doing, that ad goes all through all 200 of your episodes. So even if I were to discover you and go, let me listen to episode 5 and see what happened back then, I would hear a current ad for what's coming up for you. So, really cool opportunity for business owners there to market their own business. I'm super glad you're taking advantage of that, but I'm also super glad that you brought it up so that I'm not the
Yeah.
only person encouraging them to do that.
No, well, you know what? It's such a good idea because I know I listen to a lot of podcasts and sometimes I'll be like, well, what does this person even offer?
Mhm.
Or what does this person do? And you might be a fan who listens for a while, but you don't really know what she offers or he offers. So sometimes you need that reminder. And I once had a like discovery call with a potential new client and she was like a little giddy because she had listened to my show for so long. And that was a very, very cool moment of being like, wait, you listened to my podcast and she was excited to talk to me. And I thought that was so cool, right? Like you don't think that can happen, but it does. And so I don't remember if I particularly had an ad on an episode she heard, but somewhere I mentioned that I work one-on-one with clients and she took advantage of getting on a call with me. So it does give you that ROI of just recording a 10 to 15-second ad and throwing it up on your own show.
Easy enough too, right? Since you're sitting there recording with someone or maybe a solo episode, like you said, you're teaching, have ChatGPT script you up a little ad for yourself. You could tell it like this has to be a 15-second script for whatever service you want to market, and that can be inserted anywhere. So thank you for bringing that up. And you did mention your book is coming out soon. I'm sure you've been guesting everywhere possible lately. Would you share a little more about how are you getting your guest spots? And is there a program that you're using or you got a secret pitch that you use? Like how are you successful in that space?
I actually have used Podmatch for quite some time, and I haven't used it in a while because I didn't up until maybe actually it's so funny. It was right after the holidays. So in January, I was really focusing on the book coming out in May, and I was like, you know what? I've had my Podmatch paused for a while, but I'm going to bring it back open. I don't currently need guests for my podcast because I'm booked up a little ways. So I said, I just want to go on as a guest. And so far, up until now, it's the beginning of March, I've booked myself on almost 60 podcasts, all through Podmatch and maybe like a couple other here and there because I've just really focused on it. I wrote a like short little pitch with like links, like, oh, you can check out more information here and there. And I just pitched myself. And it's been really cool. I've been tracking like how many, and it's been like very time consuming, but it's like the perfect way to promote your book and your services and then get to meet new people that now I'm like, do you want to come on my show down the road? And can we help promote each other in different ways? So yeah, Podmatch is great. And then some Facebook groups I'm in. And also I think, I don't know about you, but like now that we've met, it would be really easy for me to suggest other people to you because now I know what your podcast is about and I know you more. And I find that there's people who will reach out and say, oh, I found someone who has a really great second act success story. Can they come on your show? Let me introduce you. So I think that's where the networking comes back into it too.
So let's back that up just a little bit. Basically, in January and February, which is maybe 60 days, you've done 60 podcast interviews. That's intense.
Well, I've booked them. I have some that are still like
Okay.
coming up, but yeah, that's how many I've booked myself on.
That's
So
intense. That's a
yeah.
great success story right there.
Oh, thank you.
That's
I'm
awesome.
trying.
Yes, and Podmatch is the platform that I recommend anybody who's interested in guesting on podcasts. I will say, I spoke to Alex recently, and he said that on the platform, we have a ratio of about one podcast host to every 44 people who want to be a guest. So if you are a host on that platform right now, you will have no problem finding guests. It's actually becoming a bit competitive to be a guest on podcasts because, like we were just talking about, we all know that that is a fantastic way to reach other audiences that someone has already done the legwork to build. So, I mean, yes, it works. The guesting space is getting a little bit competitive, and it's actually really beneficial now to be able to say, well, yes, I'm a host also, because there are shows like mine who require you to have your own show so that you can be on my show. So,
Perfect. And you can turn that feature on and off, which is great. Like, and so if someone does say, well, can I come on your show? Then of course I just make my calendar, like I think my calendar opens up in the summer. So it's, I don't want to lose that connection. I'm like, sure, you can come on. Here's my link to book in July, whatever it is. So you can really have that control over your schedule and both the guesting and the hosting there too, which is nice.
yeah, that's perfect. As they're launching their podcast, or maybe they're trying to grow their podcast, some people listening already have one. Some people listening are thinking about launching one and they know they should. They're sitting on it. But what advice do you have? I mean, 200 episodes in, I know you've learned some things. So lay it on us.
Yeah, I think it's the consistency, right? It's just saying that I'm going to launch every single week on this day or every other week. For me, it's every week. Once I tried to do several times a week and it just got to be too much. So I said, okay, I tried it. I'm not going to do that. So see what works for you and then stay consistent. And it's okay to repeat too, especially now I think with 200, like there's people who aren't listening to my first 50. So I sometimes go back and take that and replay that as kind of like an encore episode if I'm really busy and don't have time to put one up because it's just new content still. So just always repurpose that content and know that you've got so much. So at the end of the year, you can do a best of episode. Like you're just constantly bringing in more content, and that content can also be used as blogs on your website and social media content. So it's really endless. And I think a lot of people don't fully utilize everything that they create when they have a podcast. So look at it as an adventure and just find something that works for you and then utilize everything you get from that energy you're putting out there. And it'll come back to you.
I agree. Well, and a lot of times we talk about repurposing, like you mentioned earlier, onto social media, onto blogs, in your newsletter, and really sharing it out and repurposing treads on marketing the show a little bit. But I don't think it's talked about enough about how you can just literally reuse episodes or portions of episodes to create those best of highlights. Or even if you, while you were talking, I was thinking about it. So many people have touched on similar threads through 50 conversations. I could piece together like the top most insightful conversations on that thread from 5 different people, and that could be an episode. So there's lots of creative options that can like almost fill space. So you don't have to have that episode every week. Or if a solo episode is coming up and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to say, you could do one of these creative solutions. What else have you done in that space as far as like episode highlights or best of or anything? Do you have any other creative ideas that you would want to share?
Yeah, I love the idea of kind of finding similar people or similar stories that you can compile together. I've definitely done like the year end recap. I've tried to get a little creative with the solo episodes of just, like once I did one when I got back from Podcast Movement, I just hopped on and like talked for 10 minutes about what I learned. and kind of letting myself think that it doesn't have to be so scripted and so polished and perfect. It can literally just be like, this was my week. It sucked for this reason. And let me tell you the hardships that I've had and how I've come out on the other side, right? Just kind of like what you would put in your newsletter, but put it into podcast form and just talk. And I found that some of those shorter solo episodes have gotten more listens and downloads than, the more produced, polished interviews. So to just give yourself like permission to just go on and talk sometimes. And I've definitely done that. And it might feel like I'm rambling to myself, but then it comes together. But I definitely want to try what you were saying and really find those. Like, I know I have a lot of like teachers who transitioned into X, Y, and Z. And that could be a nice episode of just like, hey, what teachers have done as their second act. So that's a great idea.
Thank you. I mean, sometimes we just have to get creative. I'm even thinking about my own show, once a quarter or something to look at, what are some common threads that, people have been talking about lately, or how can these 5 people that mentioned this thing fuel this topic, or, you could take that any which way you wanted. And now you're giving me ideas. So I appreciate that.
Well, also, one other thing is that I often ask the same 5 questions at the end of most of my episodes. You made me realize that I've gone back and taken, like, what's your advice for someone who's starting a second act, and taken clips from a bunch of different people and compiled episodes about here's advice on starting a second act, or, what was the thing that scared you the most when you made this leap? And I've compiled things like that. So it is nice to kind of have a thread where you kind of ask similar questions and then you can pull those answers. And if you have a spreadsheet to kind of document a lot of this, that's even better for you to kind of make these, compiled episodes a little easier.
Yeah, for sure. What do you see coming up now that you're 200 episodes in? You're very experienced with your show. What should someone who's at that level be thinking about with their podcast? Like, how do you grow from here? What's coming up?
I think for me, I want to start focusing a little bit more on the solo episodes and, taking more advice and making them into little bite-sized episodes that I can produce and get out that aren't as interview based. So I think I'm going to focus on that and maybe do an interview once a month or twice a month, kind of pepper those in. So that's kind of where I'm focusing. But I'm not someone who has like seasons to my podcast. I'm not planning on like just focusing on a certain topic here and there. So I'm just going to keep going. I think I like the consistency, and it's just the challenge. Like, it's kind of just ingrained that this is what I do every week and I look forward to it. So I just want to keep it going and hope that it just leads to other things, but yeah, I don't see a whole lot changing, just to keep going and reaching more people.
Yeah. That's what I see with more mature podcasters. You see this almost like hockey stick style growth happen, whether it be around episode 50 or whether it be around episode 100 or 200. But there are these different spikes throughout the journey. And it's like the stock market, like it just kind of keeps going up and up like forever. And yes, there are corrections, but in general, over a long period, the longer you sustain and be consistent and keep producing anything, even if the style of what you're doing changes, or you rebrand, or you shorten episodes, or go solo, or start interview, like whatever you choose to do, the longevity is what really creates the traction. And I think that's so important for people to realize. Like, it's truly a long game. You're in it for the long haul. And it's really important just to lean in.
Mm-hmm. As long as you enjoy it too. If you're enjoying it, then keep going, right? It's something fun and you're serving others who are listening. So it's a win-win.
Absolutely. Well, we all want a win-win in following you. So tell us where we can find and follow you.
Yeah. Well, my book is coming out. It's called Start Your Second Act. So you can go to startyoursecondact.com. That comes out in May. And then from there, you can get to my regular website where it's got my podcast and my blog and my free resources and how to work with me. But yeah, and I'm at Second Act Success on social.
Perfect. I love how all of your stuff is same label, same name, same, like, that's great.
Yes.
I love
Keeps
it.
it easy.
Thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you so much. This was great.